David Clendon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Garrett. Mr. Speaker, this bill has one very single and one very simple purpose.
Point of order, Grant Robertson.
Various speakers' rulings about people moving to other seats to facilitate interjection. I know that in this House we have a fairly flexible regime in that regard, but we have seen several examples of it from Mr. Garrett and both in the last speech and even before Mr. Clendon was able to get a word out.
No, I don't need any assistance, thank you. I have cautioned members, this is a members' day, and we have a perhaps slightly better standard of debate, one would hope, in that regard to the partisan party operation, and Mr. Quinn does have a right of reply, and he might like to contain his interjections. Interjections are part of this House if they are rare and reasonable, and we have gone beyond rare and reasonable. David Clendon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I was saying, this bill has a single and quite a simple purpose, which is to deny the vote to anyone currently serving a prison sentence. That's quite a significant shift in the current arrangements, and yet there's very little in this bill in the way of argument or justification for that proposed change, which leaves us left to speculate as to what is the underlying purpose. And I must agree with some of the speakers who have already noted it does seem to be a response to the very simplistic populist call for longer sentences, for tougher punishment for criminals, which allegedly are going to solve our problems, and of course we know that in fact they won't. Putting people in jail is punishment for a crime. There isn't anything to be gained from punishing them further by stopping them from voting. Further marginalising prisoners from our society and denying people the vote will contribute to that extra marginalisation, will contribute to the growing underclass that this government pretends that they're concerned about. Research from the US, it's very well-founded research, very credible research, shows that depriving prisoners of the vote is not good for the rehabilitation and reintegration into society. It further alienates people from the norms of mainstream society. How far is this government planning to go? We hope we don't get to a situation similar to the United States, where indeed ex-prisoners are denied the right to vote. Currently there are some 5 million Americans, something like 14%, or 1 in 7 of every African American male is disenfranchised. Let's hope this government's somewhat irrational approach to justice issues does not take us too far down that road. The bill's explanatory note acknowledges that it is ignoring the advice of the 1986 Royal Commission on the electoral system, supported by advice from the Solicitor General in 1992. It doesn't, however, provide an argument for what this bill will achieve. The 86 Commission noted that disqualification of prisoners was not uncommon internationally, and that its origin lies in the view, and I quote, that voting is a privilege rather than a right, to be extended only to the people in only to people of substance and standing in our community. The Greens reject absolutely the notion of voting as a privilege to be doled out by who knows who. We see voting as an absolute right in regards to the franchise. It is a right of every citizen to vote, with a very few exceptions. The state's right to coerce citizens and imprisoning citizens is perhaps the most obvious and extreme example of that coercion. And it depends on its legitimacy as an elected body with power and authority supported by an electoral mandate. The right to vote is one that ought only to be withdrawn in the most exceptional circumstances, and the fact of a prison sentence of less than 3 years falls far short of any reasonable test. The Auditor General's assessment tabled in the House on March 17th concluded that a blanket disenfranchisement of prisoners is inconsistent with Section 12 of the Bill of Rights and not justified under Section 5 of that Act. It is true that the first draft of any bill can contain an error, a drafting error, some reason why the Attorney General might pick up a provision that does put it in breach of that Act. The core purpose, however, the core principle of this Act is clearly in breach of the Bill of Rights. It is something that should be sufficient in itself to stop the bill in its tracks. Deterrence is often rolled out as a rationale for populist and ineffective punitive measures. This indeed is intended as a justification. Very few people think rationally before committing a crime. Very few people will stop at the point they're about to commit a crime for fear they will lose their right to vote. It simply is not a reasonable expectation. The prison system is imperfect and not always just. We know that people are incarcerated while others committing similar crimes are allowed to serve a sentence in some other way or escape conviction altogether, and that point has been made. In summary, it's our belief the proposal in this bill is not helpful. It will take us nowhere in terms of reducing offending or indeed recidivism in this country. It will not reduce our prison population. It will not make us a more peaceful, secure or cohesive society. And for those reasons, the Greens will continue to oppose the passage of this bill. Thank you.
Sandra Gowdy.